we've lit the UK, we've lit Europe, and we've lit the US up, right? Okay, so now we've got those 27 million in the US and, you know, a larger amount in Europe.
I mean, it's when I was doing some research, I mean, it's massive.
It is.
And it's only going one way.
Find people and reward people that have got specialist knowledge and building out that specialist knowledge. 4.0 is a payment network for sub £20 payments.
What year do you think it will be before we don't see cash?
Oh, I mean, cash is a hot topic, right?
This episode of All Things Business, the podcast, is brought to you by our digital media partner, DFA Law. DFA Law, providers of expert and dedicated legal advice to businesses and families since 1838. DFA Law, the law firm for life.
Richard Bell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ben. Nice to be here. Nice to see you again.
So we've got a couple of mutual friends in common, and this is one of those episodes, I was saying to Arthur before we started, that we might look back on in a year or two and go, see, we were one of the first to have Richard on the podcast, or a podcast, should I say. So you've got a very impressive resume, but just for those that perhaps are watching that haven't come across you before, just introduce yourself to them.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, you're right about the next year, though. I think we're in for an exciting ride, to be honest. And, you know, I don't think it's ever been as fast for me in my professional career. I've spent the last 20 years in payments, payment innovation. I've worked with some of the large brands, which you'll know, Visa. I've worked with Ripple in San Francisco, probably one of the largest crypto companies that, is privately owned. And I've also worked within financial service and telecommunications. So I've spent a long time bringing new products and services to market, and I've usually worked on the leading edge of innovation. And it just seems to be getting faster and faster by the year. And this last year, of course, it's exploded with a combination of AI. But we're also seeing a huge amount in the crypto world now becoming, exciting again. So a lot happening in stable coins and the like as well. And so I guess, my background and my career is kind of at the confluence of those two areas. It's phenomenally exciting.
The brand now, or that your company is 4.pay.
4.0 is the
4.0
company, yeah.
And if we look, I mean, your home is MK, Milton Keynes.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is a real sort of tech hub as well. We've got a lot of technology and innovation that's going on in Milton Keynes.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
But that accent isn't from Milton Keynes. And you've also spent a chunk of your career traveling international or working internationally, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the accent is a Yorkshire accent. And it's travelled all over the world with me. I've spent most of my working career in London, so in the city. And then I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time out in Southeast Asia and East Asia, so working in Bangkok, Singapore and Japan, China and the like. And whilst I was out there, I spent a lot of time then backwards and forwards to San Francisco with Ripple. So yeah, it's
and that global, I suppose the sector's referred to as global payment sector.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, it's when I was doing some research, I mean, it's massive.
It is. And
it's only going one way.
That's right, it is. And it's going there fast. It's been, there's been a lot happened over the last 10 years. And I think, we're about to see a lot more happen as well. And when I went out to Asia, I went out there for a particular reason to do a particular job. And I thought, I'll go out there and I'll execute, that particular job. I thought I'll take the experience that I've got from London and, and I'll be able to go out and, share that experience. And when I was out there, I learned a huge amount. I mean, the innovation that's going off in Asia is just unbelievable. The digital wallet usage in Asia is phenomenal. And we saw lots of exciting things there.
So just if you can, because I think I definitely, and probably some of our audience will probably be maybe a little naive to it in terms of the innovation, and I think we almost take for granted. So, I was one of those a couple of years ago, Richard. It's only been this last 12 months that I've sort of gotten everything gone on to Apple Pay.
Right.
So I'm a dinosaur, if you like.
Yeah.
And I would always want to. I even went through a period where I didn't trust contactless.
Right. Yeah.
And this was before it went over £100 limit. Yeah. I'd always want to be a chip. I wanted to be a chip and pin man.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, the fear of me being one of those people that you read about that that gets it, that finds out afterwards that something's happened on their contactless or whatever. So I was probably later coming into it in terms of having the appreciation just how easy things like the digital wallet is. But take me back to those times in Asia where you can compare how far ahead they were than maybe what we were in terms of maybe Europe. Would that be fair?
Yeah. That's good. I mean, you know, you're right. I mean, chip and pin came along in Europe, the contactless, and I just want to pause on that for a moment because, you know, when contactless came out in about 2007, somewhere in about that region, then the Olympics was the big explosion actually in the
here,
UK.
2012.
Yeah, in 2012. But you know, before that, you know, people were paying cash.
Yeah,
People were paying cash for most things, and then suddenly after that, there was a huge change. There was a huge change in people's behaviours and activity, and you know, so we saw a lot less cash in circulation. We saw a lot more acceptance with card, which meant it was a lot faster, it was a lot easier, it's a lot more convenient. You weren't carrying loose change in your pocket, and suddenly overnight, cash seemed old-fashioned. Well, the similar thing had happened out in Asia, I'd guess a few years before that. So, I mean, I remember the first time I had an Alipay wallet. So I'm in China, I'm in Shanghai, and I had an Alipay wallet and I'm in a cab, just a regular cab. And on the back of the headrest was a QR code. And when I got to the end of the cab ride, I'm thinking, how do I pay? And it points to the QR code. I scan the QR code, I type in whatever the fare was, I press go, and I pay for that. And that was in 2010.
wow.
You know, and
So 15 years ago.
yeah, exactly. And those wallets then were permeating. I mean, Alipay's, you know, they've got huge penetration. You know, over 1 billion users. I think Alipay's got. WeChat's say another alternative to that. They've got a similar user base, and so the majority of the Chinese population were already using these in 2010, sorry, when I was first there. So that was kind of amazing. And then you get out into, you know, Southeast Asia and you get people like True Wallet, etc. They've got a huge amount of different innovations and different payment methods. And, you know, the innovation, I think the first ones that we saw probably in the UK was, you know, we used to have backs and you'd make a payment 3 days later, you know, the payment would be made. And then we took a jump and we started to get FPS, faster payments. And you could expect to make a payment and that payment to arrive immediately.
Yeah.
But you were still doing that from your mobile banking application or from online banking application. Yeah, you didn't have a mechanism to be able to do it outside of that. And so from a retail perspective, that became difficult. And I think what the wallets out in Asia did, they allowed you to pay with your wallet in an immediate environment. So, you know, Bangkok, Thailand, they have something called prompt pay, which was similar to faster payments, allowed you to pay backwards and forwards. But you'd get a QR code on the side of a street vendor selling, you know, the Thai equivalent of hot dogs, and you could use your banking application to scan their QR code and make a payment immediately to a vendor.
And would the, like, so we've seen probably, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of those changes with that technology over here have been great and welcomed and sort of flourished, but there's tend to be some of those restrictions as well, up to certain values maybe. Was that the same back in Asia?
Yeah, I mean, of course, usually what typically people are doing when they bring new innovation is they put a cap on things as they get more comfortable with it. Exactly.
And then expand.
And they launch it out, yeah. But, you know, the cards had been rolled out in Thailand. They'd been out for 10 plus years, maybe 2 decades. 800,000 acceptance terminals. Okay, in Thailand. Within about 2 or 3 years of prompt pay and the QR code being out there was over 2 million. Wow. Yeah, so you can see, you know, it was a huge uptake was that, and it became very, very accessible, which meant that then digital payments and acceptance of digital payments, you know, for physical goods this was kind of ubiquitous. Anybody could have it. Okay, it wasn't restricted to people who could afford quite an expensive card terminal. Yeah,
and that's the other thing as well, because when we have some events that run throughout the year, and getting the old, I'm going back a few years now, but getting the old PDQ machine, it was always a case of we can't justify the cost of them because we're only probably going to use them 3 or 4 times a year,
right?
And they're probably only going to take a few £1,000. You know, more than 5, but less than 15 grand. And we there wasn't the point in either the upfront cost or the or the monthly maintenance on it. Now, I know things have changed now, and it's become more accessible for smaller businesses like us to have that. And obviously, with things like Stripe, for example, which is really good because we can now take that, and we could take payments on Stripe. I mean, the fees are another thing,
I mean,
but
and that's the main.
And I think we'll come on to that.
Yeah,
we'll come on to
sure.
that in a bit. But if I can, cash. Go back to cash. I'm not going to say, do you ever see a world? Because I think I know the answer to that. What year do you think it will be before we don't see cash?
Oh, I mean, cash is a hot topic, right? Okay, are you leaving people behind if you get rid of cash? Are you introducing a cost of society by issuing cash?
Yeah.
And so it's a very complicated argument, and I'm not smart enough to get in the middle of that. I think there's some intelligent people having those debates. I don't know what the right answer is. I think we're getting some experience from the Scandinavian countries where Sweden went all out for digital, and I think now is pulling back a little bit from that. So I think that there's still, I wouldn't say cash is dead. And I'm not predicting its death. I think that there needs to be digital alternatives to cash. So what does cash bring? Cash is ubiquitous. Anybody to anybody accepts it. We don't need a special acceptance type. We don't need.
Well, not everybody does accept cash now, though.
Well, that's true, but in most people do, and those that do accept it can typically take it and they can spend it somewhere else. So it's very liquid. It's very it's very easy to utilize. I think if we move to digital, we need to bring some of the characteristics of cash with it. So it's got to be ubiquitously accepted. You can move it here and there. You can pay with it wherever you are. It's also got to maintain its value, so it can't change value, which some currencies do that. So some of the stable coins fluctuate from time to time, despite the stable coin name. Fraud is a big important aspect as well. So and there's a number of different reasons why cash is.
And on that,
anonymity. Sorry, finally, anonymity.
Yeah.
Right. Cash is anonymous. Okay, and typically digital payment systems are not. So lots of people want anonymity for various reasons. We've got to decide whether, anonymity is worth the cost of issuing cash.
So it fascinates me now that we've got somebody with your very impressive resume, living in Milton Keynes, that's got this company that's taken all of your decades of experience within this. I think it's fair to say it's a very niche sector, but it's a sector that actually affects every single one of us, either as a consumer or as a business owner.
Absolutely.
But it's still very niche in terms of that top talent.
I think it's absolutely true that it's kind of niche in terms of its area. It's a payment innovation. I think what I'd say is that we've talked about the wallets throughout Asia. We talked about some of the innovation contactless in the UK, and these are all typically in the physical world. Okay, but what's happened is they haven't necessarily stretched across into the digital world. Okay, so that's kind of become a problem. The reason that Jeremy and I set up 4.0, Jeremy, my co-founder, a long-term veteran of payments as well, is because we'd seen that the internet had never really received a payment layer that it needed and should have. It's only new as the internet. It's 20 years old, right? So if we're thinking housing terms, we're not even yet in mud huts, right? It's less than 20 years old. And, and in that short period of time, the way that we consume content has changed dramatically, right? I don't remember the last time I bought a newspaper, the last time I bought a magazine, the last time I filed a piece of paper at home for a warranty for something. I've gone digital. I'm completely digital. And I don't think I'm alone in that space, right?
Agreed, yeah.
So everybody's gone digital in terms of their content, usage. And yet we haven't got a payment mechanism to be able to satisfy the small value payments. Okay, so
is this the area that you and Jeremy have
absolutely
identified and thought right?
4.0 is a payment network for sub £20 payments, and we've focused upon that. There's lots of people doing lots of different innovations in payment. Cross-border payment seems to be the big one, but what we're not seeing really some fundamental changes in the internet. When it's been built, we think it's been missing two big layers. It was missing identity, and it was also missing payments. And the consequence of that is that you either get overexposed with ads, okay, and that really kills your experience as a user, or alternatively, you end up having to pay a subscription. And the problem with subscriptions is that whilst sometimes they're convenient and useful when you know the brand, there are probably only 15 brands globally that you know and that you trust. Okay, so we've got, millions and millions of content creators creating content, and you're not going to take a subscription with them. And from a content creator perspective, they don't really have alternatives,
So before we hone in on that, okay, because I'm really intrigued on that marketplace. Talk me through the name of the business. Talk me through the story about that.
Fourdotzero.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in the fourth stage of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so we got to play on the 4 with a 4.0.
Okay.
And so we, the digital revolution, if you like, is kind of,
upon us,
and we are, right in the middle.
Yeah.
We're right in the middle of that. Where we do, our 4.0 wallet facilitates real world payments as well. So if you go down the market store, you could buy something with our wallet, and the vendor could put up their QR code, and they could accept that. That could happen. But we really built the product to be dealing with the digital world and the content creator space, who we think, they don't have any options, right? Their options are limited, and it's a hugely expanding market. Goldman Sachs claims by 2027, and there's more ambitious or more bullish predictions than this, but Goldman Sachs claims by 2027, the content creator market globally will be worth about $500 billion. Okay, and within excess of 100 million content creators. Today, there are 27 million content creators, according to LinkedIn, in the US alone. 44% of those. Okay, so what's that? 27, nearly half, so about 12 million are full time in their occupation.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a huge market.
So these content creators, I mean, this is everything. I mean, you've got a really lovely case study on your website for Sam, the guitar teacher, which is great, because you then sort of look at it and you go, I get it now. I get why.
Right.
And that was it was actually quite powerful. It's only a 60-second video, but that's where the penny dropped for me as to how this has changed his business model, really.
Sure.
And those businesses like Sam's in that case, they're a big part of our economy. And I'm only looking at the UK, by the way, because I struggle to get my head around some of the numbers that we produce as a country.
Yeah.
But 94% of our economy in this country is made up of small businesses.
Right.
The majority of them are obviously micro businesses. And then some of those figures that you've talked about there about just content creators, which are in that sort of, I don't know if they wouldn't really come under. I mean, they'd be their own sort of sector, their own space, rather than marketing. But a chunk of them are going to come under the marketing umbrella.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think you raise a really good point, because when we think about content creators, depending where you're from, what you do, often we're thinking about people that are just making small, silly videos, right?
Yeah.
And they're getting lots of attention. But we shouldn't be thinking about that, right? Content creators could be making educational content.
Yeah.
Okay. We work with a number of people that do. You mentioned Sam. Sam's a guitarist and teaches people how to play the guitar, and he teaches advanced guitar players how to advance their skills. We also work with people that are software developers and teach other specialist software developers how to develop in a particular environment or a particular language. So you could argue that these are not kind of lightweight just entertainment people. They're selling skills and experience.
Yes.
And I often think that if you go back to the old world, the cottage industries, right? What we've got these small businesses, and for the first time in their life, these small businesses have suddenly got a global scale market.
It just gives them a platform for them to be able to sell to. I mean, in Sam's case, it doesn't matter where they are.
Well, I was just looking at the numbers, refreshing myself. There's 8.2 billion global population, 5.7 are on the internet, right? So that's your market. You've got 5.7 billion people that can access your content, from wherever you are in the world. If you're in London, you could be selling content. New York, Paris, Shanghai,
Milton Keynes.
Adelaide, Milton Keynes, you could do. So, all these content creators are kind of there and they're on the precipice, but the problem that they've got is, typically they can't build enough trust to get subscriptions, right? Okay, so they need an alternative model, and if they work with existing infrastructure, so you mentioned some of the other payment providers that we've got already, they can be losing over 30%. Right, of the value of their content. They also, typically, because they're typically hosting on somebody else's land, they're on rented land, right? Okay, so they host their content to sell, and they're hosting it on somebody else's platform.
One thing I've never got, and we don't take a lot of money on Stripe, but it'll be thousands of pounds throughout the year, but broken down, it's not like it's every week, if you like. But a lot of our events or ticket purchase will be done on card, and therefore it comes through Stripe. But what I've never got my head around is they take the payment, so we get notified, and then it's sort of stored, and they take their fee off of that.
Yeah.
But then for some of the chunky ones, or if sometimes cash flow's a bit tight and we want to withdraw from that, we can access it the day within minutes of it being processed.
Yeah.
But then you pay another fee on top as well.
Yeah, you're factoring, yeah.
But there's no consistency with, and I imagine in the terms and conditions somewhere, that it will tell us that depends on the card that they've paid on, or if it's a credit card or a debit card or whatever. But there's no real consistency with, it stays here for 7 days, and therefore it's X percentage, but you can withdraw it now, and then it's Y percentage, because sometimes it stays in there for 7 days, 10 days, or 5 days.
Right.
It's those three different times: 5 days, 7 days, and 10, and that's I've always found that frustrating, but I suppose not frustrating enough to really look into it. But I think I'm a good barometer for other people that would use Stripe. And this isn't me digging Stripe out at all, by the way. It's just that sort of facility.
Well, one of the reasons we've kept low on the value, sub 20, is because we think that's where the problem is, right? When you go higher than that, you've got a bunch of different fraud and risk management profiles. And I think what you're running into are some of those, right? Okay, so there's a number of different control mechanisms that payment companies use to make sure that if fraud happens, they can get the money back and redistribute it to where it should be. There's some commercial reasons why they keep it as well. What we've focused on is we think this is it's a low value problem. Okay, and therefore we've built a system to deal with low value problems. And if you were Sam, the guitar teacher, and you arrive on his website, our product allows you to embed a checkout module on the website. You can sell what we call pay-per-use type content, right? So low value, say £2 a go, and Sam pays a very, very small amount for that. If you're with, some of the other payment providers, you could be paying 50 to 70 pence for that transaction, which is a huge chunk, right? But soon as the buyer buys from Sam, which is a very easy transaction, they press buy, then they press pay, and the transaction gets settled immediately, and Sam gets credited immediately. Okay, so it's a completely different profile of activity, and it's very focused on allowing these content creators to be able to really play in the space that they want to play in. They want to be able to engage directly with their own customers. They don't want to do it via a platform where they've got to get millions of users to earn, quite a limited amount of money. They want a direct relationship where they can nurture that relationship. They're not playing out on the algorithm that can change or the policy that can change.
Again, the algorithm, that's something that you sort of take for granted, really, because I think we've all been, in one way or another, we're all naive to how that algorithm can work and throw people off.
Well, people are typically guessing how it works, right? So they optimize, they guess, and then they get it right, and they've got a good business, and then it changes. And their business proposition, their offering didn't change. Their customer base and their relationship with the brand didn't change, but the algorithm changed. And suddenly that brand is not as accessible. You know, people are becoming, the content creators that we speak to are becoming frustrated with that. When they build out a customer base, you can imagine if all your customer base, suddenly something changed outside of your control and they were being routed to your competitor. That's kind of not a good way to do business, is it? No. So you want to own that customer. You want to bring them, you want to get off that rented land. They want to build their own digital home. Okay, they want to build a deeper relationship with their existing customers, and they want to build it so that there's more loyalty in the customer, but also so that they're able to serve that customer better. And if you're working more closely with the customer, giving it the products, the customer the products that they need. So these content creators that we see, with the explosion of content creators, we don't think they're going to be like the past content creators that were effectively selling entertaining, attention, right? We think it's going to be a deeper engagement. And Simon Kemp, he publishes, I don't know if you've seen it. If not, I'd recommend anybody to look at this. It's called the Data Report. And he does it every year. I can share a link with you guys if you're interested. But anyway, he reports a whole series of internet usage statistics. And the one that I like to keep an eye on is the average weekly usage of internet, which is about 33 hours per person, right?
Really, is it?
Yeah, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. But the thing about that number, and he's just transitioned this year from it being a daily number to a weekly number.
Yeah.
But what we'd seen before is we had seen that the saturation point, so people's daily usage of the internet had topped out around about 6.5 hours, right? Okay, which feels like quite a lot, doesn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah.
But there's the numbers, right? But it topped out over a number of years, and I think what we've seen is that we've been it's been growing and growing and growing in utility as the internet, as the content that we use there. But as it tops out, now people's attention is getting to what's called deeper content. They don't want the shallow stuff anymore. We're not just being excited by new things. We're on a mission to go and find meaningful and useful things, either for our home life or for our work life.
Yeah.
Whichever it is. And so we're prepared to dig deeper into content, and we want more valuable content. And attention content is not necessarily valuable content.
I'm fascinated by the niche industry that's very, very fast paced.
Indeed.
Yeah. And again, if you were to plot it and look back almost like at the last 5 years of your industry, there's some big things that have happened there. Sure. This is two questions here. What's the biggest challenge that you and Jeremy find yourselves in? And with that, how can you make sure that you're at the forefront of those changes in terms of embracing how fast innovation is and technology is changing? Because I mean, like, I'm just so my head just couldn't operate. I'm not as intelligent as you guys, but you could have a plan, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, well, there's this new technology or innovation. How does that impact us and our customers? And you guys have to obviously. You're quite clear. You guys know what you're doing, so you're at the forefront of it. Mm-hmm. But how do you sort of? Well, I suppose firstly, Richard, what's the biggest challenge for you guys over the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
Sure. So I think the thing that drives me and the thing that I'm excited about is that if you think about these content creators, right, and the latent knowledge that they've got inside themselves, right, and so the only thing missing between that latent knowledge and connecting it with people that are interested in that latent knowledge is a motivator, right? And the motivator is a fair exchange of value, right? So I want to buy that information, and I'm happy to provide it for you to buy, yeah? So I think we're in the middle of that. We're facilitating that transaction, okay? And, so I'm laser focused upon that. Right, anything that distracts me from that, which is easy to get distracted in the world that we're in, and so staying super focused upon that is probably the biggest challenge, yeah. But the vision for me is clear, right? That we it shouldn't be more complicated, right? It shouldn't be more complicated making a purchase on the internet than it is walking past a coffee vendor and whipping out your phone and making an Apple Pay payment and walking on with your cup of coffee. And at the moment, it is. It's much more complicated than that. So as you surf on the internet, whatever, right? You're looking for something and you find a report on a recipe that you'd like to cook, and and it's got 5 stars and it's looking good, and they want to charge £1 for it. I want to be able to facilitate that transaction, and today it's not there. It's not a viable world to do that. And I think So getting super focused upon that. Now, what's the biggest challenge? I think, was a part B of that question, yeah? And the biggest challenge, of course, is that, people are already, they're in an existing world, okay? And so, bringing the idea that the internet is not free, right? Usually it costs you your time, okay? If it doesn't cost you your time, it'll cost you your data. We know that, right? If it's free, you're the product, right? It's an old adage, is that, yeah? But people are less, are becoming more concerned about their time and getting quality of content, yeah? So we think we've got an answer to that. And how do we get that answer to people so that their behaviour becomes more accommodating to be able to say, right, I value that and it's worthy of my time. I'm not really thinking about how much I spend on coffee per week when I buy coffee, yeah? Well, would some of my, a similar or lesser expend for really valuable information and content, be worthwhile my expenditure?
I'm just thinking about the number of transactions that I would make that would be under the 20 quid mark. And I don't know, is there any data out there? I mean, there must be, but I don't know if you know this.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Go on.
I do. I know in Western economies that 62% of all payments by volume, so that's not by value, okay, but by number of payments made.
Okay,
So not by the addition of the amount of the payments. But 62% of all payments made are below £20.
So go on. What would that equate to?
Oh, how many payments?
Yeah, I
don't have that number.
But, yeah.
I probably do somewhere
in
my bag. But
it's billions.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Maybe even
for sure. Probably not trillions in the UK, but billions. Yeah, for sure. So we're talking about a lot of payments, but I'm talking about a world where you arrive at your favourite newspaper, and instead of being presented with a £60 a month subscription for an article that somebody's pinged you and said, hey, you might find this interesting. You buy it for £1.
We've all been on those. We've all had those, yeah.
Hit the paywall,
yeah.
and you don't pull out the credit card.
No, you don't.
Because you've probably already got a subscription to somewhere else. Right?
It's funny. I mean, people that know me will believe this and will laugh. But a couple of things like have happened to me where I've left my wallet in the car.
Yeah.
I'll do that when I get home tonight because I can't be bothered to go. And like you say, because it's just, and you sort of begrudge having to buy that subscription, but actually you see the value in even just the first month. But then it's because it's not quick and easy. And this also gives the seller the opportunity to give the consumer, correct me if I'm wrong here, Richard, yes, you can have the £60 a month subscription and we've got you for the year. But actually, if you're just interested in this piece of content, give us a £5.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you arrive at, the
that could be a game changer for a lot of them,
Yeah.
Well, for so many.
Yeah.
For so many.
Indeed. I mean, we're speaking to national newspapers at the moment about this, and they're excited. We've hit their core propositional problems that making a step towards subscriptions hard. So what's the alternative? They hit you with ads. What happens when you get hit with ads? You don't enjoy the content, so you don't come back. So the ads are losing value.
And the data's already there because they can see that from their analytics in terms of bounce offs and stuff.
So then being able to introduce the per view model that they're very excited about, and it's the economics that need to change to allow that, and that's what 4.0 allows for.
And if we look at it, this is already happening in other industries. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And you hit the nail there when you said pay per view. If you look at, I like me boxing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I don't want to subscribe to DAZN because if I look at the subscriptions that I've got, we spend too much money with Sky. And I keep saying we need to reduce that because when we first started with Netflix, by the way, it was $4.99 a month as a family. Yeah. Now it's $15.99 a month. Yeah. Sky's about 120, although I think that does include our internet. And we hardly watch Sky. We're always watching Netflix. Sure. But Netflix have increased it by 300% in the last 3, maybe 4 years in terms of the package that we go for, the number of devices. Mm-hmm. DAZN, I don't know what that was, 30 quid a month. And I was like, no. But if it's a big fight night, I'm happy to pay the 20 quid for
the one-off. Yeah.
But there have been a couple of occasions recently, I can't remember the last pay-per-view, would it? Where I've almost gone, actually, do you know, it's made me really think about whether or not I should do the subscription because that's come down slightly, whereas the pay-per-view has gone up slightly.
Sure, so it's
I think it was $24.95.
A little bit closer,
yeah, and that's where you think, and that So it's interesting actually how
Yeah.
you can how other industries do that, and that's the bit that I find fascinating around
Yeah.
business. And
But I think your experience is typical, right? So what I think we're seeing with subscriptions are, there's probably, there's, I don't know, about 10 brands that people are going to feel that they trust enough to even take a subscription with. About 10. Most subscriptions, most people have on average about 6 to 7. And there's a phenomena coming out called subscription fatigue. It's not that new, right? But people are evaluating, like you mentioned with Sky, am I getting value for money out of my subscription, right? And if you've got one TV channel or one newspaper subscription, what does that mean with the other one, right? You can't access it, and you may want to watch something. So there's a sense of frustration with that, and so there's subscription fatigue. And I think on the flip side of that, it's where I'm holding off from a subscription because I don't know that I will get value, right? Or alternatively, I'm not sure whether I like the brand, right? I have no experience with a brand, and they're charging me a subscription
it's always a nervousness
to get to learn that. Yeah. And so with the boxing there, what you've done is actually you've punched through that because you've, on a risk-free way, you've been able to get what you want, right? And then as you've taken that subscription and you've built trust in the product, you're more likely to move towards subscription.
Yeah.
So we think it's quite an interesting dynamic that, if you move people from what we call browser, people who are just getting added, right?
Yeah,
They're just ads thrown at them. You move people to a commercial relationship on a pay-per-use. That does not cannibalize your subscription base, right?
Yeah.
What that can do is it can do two things. It can move people up the value chain from a pay-per-use. They now trust your brand.
Yeah.
They're now getting value for it. So a little bit like the London Underground, right? You make enough journeys on the London Underground, you get a day pass.
Yeah.
So you move, you never pay more on a pay-per-view than a monthly
Agreed.
subscription, yeah? And the other thing is that when people are subscribing, right? When people are subscribing, and the churn rate for subscriptions is massive, right? So the number of people that
But from
that
a business
stop
model
churning-
perspective, talking about growing a business and exiting, that you if you build a model where you build a subscription and you can justify that there's a 92, 93, 94% retention rate, that does so much to your multiples in terms of growing and exiting a business.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, I those guys that are pulling a 92% retention rate are phenomenal.
Yeah, I get that, and that's all around.
That is,
I get that, but that's very attractive to those, and that's why it works so well as well, because they've got that business to build on in terms of a foundation.
Yeah.
But the just going back to the publishing element, I would say the same for TV, and I'll give you an example. Mobland. Have you watched that?
I have not. No.
Right, Mobland. It's on Paramount Plus, which, again, nothing against Paramount Plus, but frustrated me because I couldn't find it quickly enough. And Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren, I mean, amazing, right? But they do play some. They do play some wacky characters,
Right,
and Pierce Brosnan's Irish, and I said to my colleague in here, it's a rubbish Irish accent, and they're like, Ben, he's Irish, and I was like, oh yeah, he is. But the point I'm making is, and I understand why they've done this, but they release one episode every Sunday, so I think it was 10 episodes.
Yeah.
I think maybe 8. So it was for 10 or 8 or 10 weeks. But if there was a pop-up at the end of each episode that said, see you in 7 days, and you've got that personalisation,
yeah.
Ben and Vicky, me and my missus, right? Because they've got our data, so they know that we're watching it on, through whatever channel, whatever we're streaming it on. But if you want to watch episode 2 now, give us a $5.
Yeah.
I'd be a nightmare for that, because I'm one of those sort of binge watchers, usually on a Sunday, where I'd be like, yes, I want to watch it. And also because sometimes I forget what's happened in episode 1 and episode 2 because it's 7 days later. But that could be a growth market, and the BBC would be a definite great income stream for them if ever they were to go down that route with some of those dramas in particular that are 4 or 5 parters. So it's interesting. So, I mean, what's the dream then? If here we are, the summer of 2025. If we roll on to December next year, so 18 months, what does it look like for you in your business?
Oh, we've lit the UK, we've lit Europe, and we've lit the US up, right? Okay, so now we've got those 27 million in the US and, a larger amount in Europe and more in the UK. The content creators are starting to, able to really access their customer base across those markets. The people that have got specialist subjects, they're really able to, excel at their specialist subject. They've got enough of a market to be able to communicate in those markets, with their product and service, and really excel in it. And it feels to me like that's a good thing for the world, right? That we're able to find people, right? Find people and reward people that have got specialist knowledge and building out that specialist knowledge.
Brilliant.
That feels like a good thing.
Richard, we're coming to the end of this episode. I've really enjoyed it. I thought it was fascinating, and we're definitely going to follow your journey and get an update from you in terms of how you have this impact on. It's more than just this country. It's going to be much further afield. So keep doing what you're doing. It's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
I've really enjoyed learning about it.
Good.
Like with all of our episodes, before you leave, I always like to ask one question.
Oh, okay.
You got a dinner party this weekend, 4 people, round the table, past or present. Who are they?
Oh, good question.
And that's why I don't send it to you in advance.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'd like Tim Berners-Lee there. Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web. I think he'd be an interesting guy to have there. I think I'd probably like Claude AI there as well.
Okay.
To chat along and introduce things. I think the next one's controversial, probably, but Elon Musk. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he dreams big.
Whatever you do.
I don't want to get involved in politics.
No, you don't. You can't say the person that he's just fallen out with because it will have an effect on the performance of this episode, won't it, Arthur?
Yeah.
So don't say that.
I made my choice with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You can't have them both unless you want to see a dog fight. Yeah. I think those would be the big players. And I think somebody from the finance world. I think that'd be interesting to get. I think Ray Dalio, former BlackRock CEO. I think he's an interesting guy as well. He's got some really sharp and astute look. So that would be
that's one very good table. And where just Milton Keynes, where would be your go-to meal out? Where would you take them?
Well, I would take them to probably the Jasmine Indian in Lloyd's Court. It's one of the it's my favourite Indian food in
Brilliant
in Milton Keynes. Yeah.
Right, Richard. Thank you ever so much. I wish you, from all the team here, we wish you all the very best going into next year and obviously for the rest of this year.
Thanks, Ben.